The official statement landed like a stone in a still pond, not just shaking the surface but stirring the murky depths beneath. Queensland's Olympics Games Minister Tim Mander was stepping aside from his cabinet position. Not a resignation, not a retirement, but a stand-down directly linked to a referral to the Australian Federal Police. The words, "potential criminal offence," hung in the air, a chilling suggestion of something far more serious than a political misstep. This wasn't about policy disagreements or budget blowouts, this was about the integrity of our democratic process, the very foundation of who we choose to represent us. The allegation that a serving minister, a man entrusted with steering the state's biggest international project, had allegedly enrolled to vote at a staffer's home address last year, without ever having lived there. It was a seemingly small act, a tick in a box, but the implications were enormous, striking at the heart of public trust and the sacred ritual of the ballot. Tim Mander was by all accounts a Queensland politician in the prime of his career. A former rugby league referee, he brought a no-nonsense, straight-talking style to the state's parliament. He represented a safe seat in Brisbane's northern suburbs, an area of established family homes, bustling local shops and a strong sense of community. Before entering politics, Mander had a long and varied career, giving him a grounded, relatable image. He was the kind of bloke you might see at the local footy club or picking up groceries at Chermside. His ministerial portfolio, sport and the Olympics, placed him at the epicenter of Queensland's most ambitious project, the 2032 Brisbane Olympic and Paralympic Games. This was a legacy-defining role, one that promised to reshape Brisbane and indeed the entire state for generations. He was a prominent face, a known quantity, a man whose public persona suggested integrity and a dedication to his constituents. His rise through the political ranks had been steady, built on a reputation for hard work and a keen understanding of local issues. He lived, as many politicians do, a public life, balancing parliamentary duties with the demands of his electorate and the ever-present scrutiny that comes with being a public figure. The controversy began to bubble a few weeks prior, not with a bang but with a slow, insidious drip of information. It was the Australian newspaper that first broke the story, alleging that Tim Mander had registered to vote at the home of one of his electorate officers. This address, crucially, was not his primary residence, nor was it an address where he genuinely lived. Electoral enrolment in Australia is a fundamental civic duty and is governed by strict rules. To vote in a particular federal or state electorate, you must be enrolled at your principal place of residence. This isn't just a suggestion, it's a legal requirement enshrined to ensure the fairness and accuracy of our elections. The initial reports suggested Mander had changed his enrollment details sometime last year, listing an address in the northern suburbs of Brisbane, an area within his electorate. The problem was, according to the allegations, he continued to reside at his long-term family home in a different part of the city. Outside the bounds of the electorate he was now seemingly claiming to live in. This wasn't a case of a simple mistake or an oversight. The act of changing one's electoral enrollment requires a deliberate action, a conscious decision to update official records. The implications were immediately clear if true. Mander had potentially misrepresented his residential status not just to the Australian Electoral Commission (AEC), but to the entire electorate and indeed to the state. The political pressure mounted quickly, a relentless drumbeat of questions from journalists and opposition politicians alike. Every day brought new scrutiny, new demands for answers. The concept of a fair go is deeply ingrained in Australian culture, and the idea of a politician potentially bending the rules for personal or political advantage. Particularly concerning something as sacred as the vote sits very uneasily with the public. The stakes became incredibly high when the matter was formally referred to the Australian Federal Police. This wasn't just a political squabble anymore, it had crossed the line into a potential criminal investigation. The specific offence being considered, though not explicitly detailed in the public statements, would likely fall under the Commonwealth Electoral Act 1918. Sections of this act deal with false statements or misleading information provided to the Electoral Commission, including in relation to electoral enrolment. The AFP's role is to investigate potential breaches of Commonwealth law and a false enrolment allegation, particularly against a senior public official, certainly falls within their purview. Mander's defense, at least in the public sphere, was vague, focusing more on the intense political pressure he faced than directly addressing the factual allegations. He stated he was standing aside to allow the processes to run their course to avoid being a distraction to the government and crucially to the important work of the Olympics. The legal process, however, is a slow and deliberate beast. The AFP would conduct a thorough investigation, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses and examining documents. This wouldn't be a quick resolution. The questions that lingered were profound. Why would a seasoned politician with a safe seat take such a risk? Was it a genuine oversight, however unlikely given the process of enrollment, or was there a more deliberate motive? The very idea of an elected official potentially subverting the system that put them in power was deeply troubling. And the referral to the AFP meant this was no longer just about public perception, it was about the rule of law. The immediate resolution was Mander's stand down from cabinet. This was not an admission of guilt, but a practical necessity given the gravity of the AFP referral. While he remained a Member of Parliament, his ministerial responsibilities, including the crucial Olympics portfolio, were temporarily reallocated. For Mander, this meant a significant loss of status and influence, a public humiliation that would undoubtedly cast a long shadow over his political career, regardless of the AFP's eventual findings. For the Queensland government, it was an unwelcome distraction, forcing them to reorganise their cabinet and manage a political crisis in the lead-up to the 2032 Games. The actual legal resolution, whether charges would be laid and if so what the outcome of any court proceedings might be, remained entirely in the hands of the Australian Federal Police and ultimately the courts. This case highlighted the often unforgiving nature of public life in Australia, where even an allegation of a relatively minor electoral offence can derail a significant political career. Justice in this instance wasn't a clear-cut verdict on Mander's guilt or innocence, but the immediate consequence of an investigation into the integrity of our electoral system. It was a compromise, a pause in his trajectory forced by the weight of public scrutiny and the activation of serious legal processes. This case, while specific to a politician, carries a crucial message for every Australian.